Yo, Poki26 here, and today I'm going to do a quick 1v1 tier list from my experience with the Battle Aces beta. Obviously, this can change based on other people's experience, and whether the game itself changes because of like future patches or how it changes from the beta itself. Obviously, the beta is not final, so this is just a preliminary tier list from my experience in solo. I'd say I'm like alright at the game. I got up to around 9,000 MMR, which is around top 100. So I did alright, and I've watched some matches as well. So I got some experience there as far as that goes. Yeah, this is my experience, and we'll just start with the tier list now. First one, going to be an easy one, and that's the Kraken in its bottom tier. Honestly, it probably should be in a tier of its own at like F tier, but we're just gonna keep it simple and just have it D tier. But yeah, it's pretty bad. It's just unrealistic, not a feasible unit to go for. Basically, if you could make a Kraken, you probably could have already won the game. Basically, that's just how it is. If you can save up enough resources to make this, you should have already won the game. Maybe there's some instances where you can like, I don't know. I think currently this is where it's at, but I could see in the future combining it with zero food turrets or something and playing defensive and trying to fit this in. It just, I don't know, not realistic, but maybe. Next, I'm going to put the two turrets on, and honestly I kind of want to put them at like C, but they're really probably just D. I don't really have that much experience with them, both playing with them or against them, but from what I've seen, they don't seem too valuable. There's like some small benefit in that they cost zero food, but the fact that you're taking up a slot on this and that the zero food doesn't come into play in most games, because generally the game is much more fast-paced, attacking back and forth, they just don't have value, at least not in current 1v1. So it's like a D. I don't even know exactly what the difference between the turret and the heavy turret is. I feel like I should, but I don't. Either way, they both just don't serve much purpose currently, so D tier. Maybe if the Kraken is an F, they'd still be D tier or something like that, but they're kind of bad. Let's get another tier 3 unit. We'll just go right to the Valkyrie. This one is S tier. The best anti-air unit in the game. It does its job, perfect. It's pretty fast. It's got alright health, high damage versus air. It does lack if you need to attack ground with it, but that's not its purpose, right? Its purpose is to make sure your opponent doesn't make heavy air themselves, whether it be the tier 2 Falcons, the tier 3 Cat Bus, or whatever. The one time I have seen a Kraken though, the Kraken did take on like 20 Valkyries at the same time. I was like, what is happening? But, that was obviously, the Kraken team was way ahead to begin with, so to be able to make the Kraken in the first place. But yeah, Valkyrie, it's like S tier. As far as other tier 3 goes, Ballista, Heavy Ballista is more like an A tier, I would say. It will win you games if you just tech tier 3 and get these out on the field, because the AoE they provide can just be insane, and you can actually just walk forward with them. You don't have to like continually plant them like mortars or something. They're quite a bit tankier than something like Shockers, and they just have very quick attack speed with good AoE splash, splash damage that just right. So these are pretty good. Like they will win straight up generally against some of the other tier 3 like advanced blinks or whatever, but advanced blinks have their own niche, or I don't even know if I want to say it's niche, but yeah, advanced blinks I would also say is A. Obviously there's a lot you can do with blink. Advanced blinks themselves seem very good at just being mobile and fast and kind of just doing hit and run. You're meant to just distract your opponent from ever reaching your side of the base, and if they misplace any units, you can pounce on them with your blink and take them out. They have air and ground attacks, so you can actually use them as a pseudo anti-air type thing. They're just pretty valuable, but they are the type of unit that needs a lot more skill to control and play and so on. Whereas heavy ballista, for instance, you can kind of just A-click ground to your opponent's base and hope for the best. They'll just kill everything. Obviously, depending on how good the players are. Another tier 3 is the Cat Bus. So Cat Bus, unlike the Valkyrie, is a anti-ground heavy air unit, and it's pretty decent. It is a little slow. It's definitely not the fastest unit, and it kind of kills a little slow as well to some extent, but it's just pretty tanky, which is the huge thing. And because it's pretty tanky, it's able to actually survive against tier 1 anti-air generally, and that in itself makes it valuable because it forces your opponent to have some sort of tier 2 or tier 3 anti-air, and not everyone wants to fit that. Some players just want to have the tier 1 anti-air, and then if they go Foundry route, they might not have the Starport route with the Valkyries or something, right? So yeah, Cat Bus is like A tier. It's definitely pretty good. Now, what unit to cover next? The Bulwark. Bulwark is bottom tier, D tier. The few times I've seen it, it just doesn't do enough. I'm not even sure if this is a fair judgment of it. It does hit air and ground, but I think it just doesn't do good enough at anything. If you're going to go tier 3 for an air unit, you might as well just have it specialize in pure anti-ground with Cat Bus or pure anti-air with Valkyrie. Because the Bulwark itself is kind of slow, clunky, it's huge on the screen, so easy to just target down with like tier 1 anti-air or whatever, or airship, whatever it might be. It just, I feel like currently it's just kind of bad. So yeah, D tier. Snipers. Now in solos, snipers is like a B. They definitely can do their niche fairly well, but they're so immobile and generally unneeded. But if you are really having trouble with like mortars or something, maybe you can try putting them in for like that. But even so, the mortar player might be pushing you at tier 2 already, so you have to already have some way to stall for tier 3 in that game. It's like a B tier. It's decent at its niche of literally sniping units from far, but realistically it's not that amazing in solo. Let's get some of the main tier 2 units that you'll see. So King Crab King Crab, I'm gonna put it A tier. This dude is definitely very powerful. It's very fast. It has alright AoE, and it's currently part of a King Crab rush where you just instant tech to tier 2. You make at least 4 King Crabs, potentially more, depending how all in you want to be. And you just literally do that. You just go all in. You go straight to their expansion, assuming the opponent instant expanded. You wipe it out, which is a guaranteed kill every time. And then you head to their main and see if you can do enough damage to where they just can't recover. Because if you wipe most of their workers or all of their workers, they're basically just dead. Even if they have some counter unit that comes out of their base and wipes your King Crabs, and then they start to march across, you've already made your own expansion if you've saved enough resources, and you have more units on the field that can just sit there. If they ever move out, you run back in and just kill what's left, basically. Or you pick off stuff on the way to your base, whatever the case may be. Basically, they're just dead at that point. And yeah, the King Crab Rush is pretty strong currently in the beta, and is definitely very good at just cheesing out some wins. It is kind of cheesy as far as strategies go, because it's essentially relying on your opponent expanding right away and not realizing that maybe they should have held off and teched themselves. As a unit apart from this King Crab Rush though, it's still fairly decent. It's not the highest health compared to some of the other frontline melee units, but it has AoE, it's fast, good at like harassing workers, good at wiping through wasps and scorpions, like, you know, the melee frontline tier 1 units. It's fairly alright. So I would say it's like an A tier. Some people probably maybe have an S, maybe someone drop it down to B, but I'll keep it at A tier. Mortar. Now, I haven't actually played Mortar myself because I just don't have an interest in this sort of unit. It's kind of like the siege tank thing from Terran in StarCraft, where you plant it up and it just does huge splash damage to ground. That being said, Mortar S tier. It's S tier in solo, it's S tier in 2s. It's just kind of broken. So there probably is some people that would even put it only at like A tier in solo, but honestly it's S tier if used properly, because it's very fast to set up, it has decent enough health, very high damage, pretty good range. There's not that much that can counter it at tier 2, and anything that can counter it at tier 2, you can pair the mortar with something like Destroyer to take those out, because the things that counter it would be, you know, maybe Crusader or Mammoth or, you know, some other tanky unit, right? But if you have Destroyers can also wipe those out fairly well. So it's, I don't know. With how well you can play defensively with a mortar, it just has to be S tier. There are definitely spots where you could catch them off guard. You can surround from all angles so that the mortar is like rotating and not getting good splash attacks off. They are definitely beatable, but from what I've seen, the value they can provide is very high, and they're the type of unit where sometimes you wait to tech just to make sure that you're able to counter tech if they go into mortars, and that's obviously a problem, I would say. So I'll leave it at S tier. And then the unit I was talking about with them, you will see Destroyers sometimes paired with them. Destroyers are insanely powerful. They are a bit slow, and their range, the range is okay, but it's really just meant to have enough range to stay in the back line and take out big melee units. That being said, they are very good at their job. They're one of those units, kind of like Valkyrie, where they fit their niche very well. They're not as long range as something like a sniper, but they do kind of the similar job where they just take out the unit that they need to take out. And that being said, the units to take out are like King Crabs, which they just one shot, or some of the heavier high health units like Mammoth and Crusader. I think they technically two shot, but they get them low enough from one shot that you can even have the rest of your units finish them off real quick, and then you shoot something else with the destroyer. Definitely very powerful, like very high damage, and can also be very high damage at buildings if you're able to get them against buildings. I'd have it at S tier. I could see it A tier as well, just because they are lacking things like splash or high move speed, or sometimes your opponent isn't even running heavy units like King Crab, Mammoth. I mean, King Crab's like somewhat heavy. Mammoth, Crusader, Behemoth, whatever. There's not that many prime targets for them, but when you are facing them, your opponent essentially gets into a spot where they might not even be able to build those units, because otherwise they're just throwing them away. Because you make King Crab, they make Destroyer. King Crab literally just dies to one shot, and they still have their Destroyer there to shoot more stuff. It's like obviously very bad for the King Crab player in that case, because Destroyers are just way too good of a hard counter. I'd have it at S, but I could see it at A as well. Another tier 2 unit, the Shocker. I'm going to put this at an A. Shocker is definitely very strong, and it has, decent AoE and so on, but it is a bit slow to attack, and that honestly can be abused a bit, because if you can bait the Shocker's attack off, either by having single units running forward and drawing the aggro. Like I said, I think I mentioned it with the turrets, but I saw someone who would like recall in and then also plant the turrets at the same time, and these turrets would, if you were just kind of A-clicking ground, the turrets would draw the Shocker aggro on their first shots, and then you had to re-target all the Shockers yourself onto the back line. Otherwise they're going to keep shooting the turrets and just be wasting your AoE shots on something like that, which did make the turrets seem potentially viable, but yeah, it's just how do I want to say it, abusing the targeting of something like that can definitely be a thing. I saw another player who would blink a single unit forward. The Shocker would shoot that single blink, and then he'd blink the other units after, take out something like a Shocker, and this obviously looked pretty strong, because it's like, oh, he'd sacrificed one tier 1 blink unit and was able to kill my tier 2 Shocker fairly easily, But that being said, Shockers in general are pretty good. Similar to King Crab, they have AoE and they are ranged instead of melee, so they lack the move speed and a little bit of the health. They're a little bit more vulnerable, but having ranged is very nice to pair behind something like Scorpions on the front line, and they're just pretty good. Here's another tier 3 unit actually. It's the Behemoth. I'm gonna put Behemoth at like an A. I honestly think it's pretty good. I could see this being too high. Maybe it should be more like a B. I don't know. Maybe it's more like a B. I kind of want to place it at an A, but realistically, the problem with Behemoth is, of course, the fact that it's a tier 3 unit. And because it's a tier 3 unit, you have to find the time to actually go tier 3 to get it unlocked. Now, Behemoth can be pretty good. The benefit of something like Behemoth is it doesn't cost blue resource, so you can essentially replace things like scorpions or whatever with behemoth, rather than making five scorpions or something like that. You can make one behemoth, a lot more tanky, and that is beneficial against like splash units like shocker and mortar and so on, or even heavy ballista, I guess, to some extent. But yeah, the problem is, like I said, it's tier 3, so it does mean you're either taking up your tier 3 slot with it or you're running double tier 3, and that means your tier 2 options then get limited, which is probably why it's more like a B tier. Yeah, I'll just leave it B tier. Leave it at that. Let's get through some of the other ones. So Falcon, tier 2 anti-ground air unit is, I'm gonna say an A. I'm definitely not gonna put it like an S, but it's pretty powerful. I'm not a huge fan of the unit, but yeah, it is the type of unit that can, in my opinion, kind of cheese out some wins. You'll see people who essentially just counter tech you. Like they just build up whatever, they make a bunch of expansions, and then once you tech into something like Foundry and you don't have, let's say, heavy hunters or something like this, the tier 2 anti-air, they will just go into Falcons and roll you, because tier 1 anti-air is generally bad against Falcons. That being said, I have actually seen players take out Falcons with tier 1 anti-air. They just essentially masked bases and went mass tier 1 and stopped their opponent from expanding further, and it actually worked. I was like, wait, is that possible? I think you have to have the right tier 1 units to do that in the first place as well, like probably like gun bots or maybe recallers combined with like blink hunters or something. Anyways, it's like A tier. You will definitely see people, like I said, do the counter tech and then mass these up and then go across and just wipe anything. They have good damage, good health. Their drawback is mainly that they're slow, but in many cases that ends up not mattering enough. And now let's cover some of the tier 1 real quick. We got the Wasps. I'm not a huge fan of the Wasps, but I have seen them used a bit and they are okay. They're very fast, but very low damage. And I think low health too. I'm not sure exactly what their health is, but I'll put them like B tier. Mainly because their range, you know, they have like okay range and they're very fast. So they still have some merit, but I'm not sure if I'd put them the best. Hunter is pretty bad. I think D tier. Hunter just doesn't serve a purpose as far as I know, because you can essentially just make, you know, the blink hunters instead and have blink. Like what's the purpose of hunter then? Instead, blink hunters like S tier as far as anti-air. The overall merit of having blink on your tier 1 anti-air is huge, because you want to be able to get around quick and target things like dragonfly and butterfly and so on, or just to reposition yourself to take things out like the Falcon. The recall hunter thing here, I'm gonna put like C tier. I think it's kind of bad, but there is some merit just because it can recall, especially if you're playing a full recall lineup. Maybe it's more like it just has to be B tier. I think it's fairly okay, but I don't know. It's just slow. Feels much easier to just do blink hunters, but I can see recall hunters being a thing. Problem is, even if you recall them in, your opponent has time to react to it and generally won't get hit by them. You just fly away and your recall hunters are just there. Whereas blink hunters can occasionally get some hits in with blinking in. which is obviously a lot better. But yeah, these recall hunters are okay. Where are the other? So this little dude here. What is he called? Yeah, Beetle. It's like a little versatile ground unit. I honestly haven't really seen this like at all. I'm pretty sure it's like, it's probably C tier. Like it's got to be better than Hunters. Maybe, or maybe it's D tier. Yeah, it's probably like D tier. It's just bad. There's just no utility to it. You know, it doesn't have recall. It doesn't have blink. It's gotta be like D tier. I kind of want to put both these at C maybe, but I think they're just D tier. This one's just a ground, anti-ground unit. It's a Scorpion. And Scorpion has been my choice so far. And it's definitely very strong. I think it's either A tier or S tier. I'm more inclined to put it at A tier. I think generally you're going to get outshone by some of the ranged units on tier 1 if the ranged unit player is really good. But Scorpions are definitely very strong. And yeah, it's at least A, possibly S. I think pairing Scorpions with a ranged unit is also very powerful, because then your ranged unit is able to just not get targeted while these are in front, and you'll generally beat other tier 1 with that sort of combo. So, that's just how I'm gonna put it. I'm just gonna put it like A tier. Definitely good. The Wasp. That being said, I want to put Wasp actually lower tier than Scorpion, but I don't really think it's B tier. Maybe Scorpion I just do put at S. And the thing is very powerful. I don't know. Would I put Scorpion or Wasp at B? I think it's, maybe I would. I think Wasps did get nerfed a bit. They're still very valuable, but they're honestly like a secondary tier 1. You don't really want Wasps to be your only tier 1, I would say. And that's kind of their problem, because it forces you into having 2 tier 1s that don't attack air, essentially. So I'll put them B tier. My experience against Wasps as a Scorpion player is that they're not too big of a problem. They're annoying. You'll definitely have an annoying time dealing with them as they're flying past you left and right to your expansion lines, but generally you'll overcome them and it's fine. That being said, I have seen them actually be pretty strong against some ranged units. They did seem like they could actually be quite annoying for like recallers even, for instance, when I saw them against that, or when I was playing recallers myself, that is. But yeah, maybe I was just bad for the few times I did play recolor. I'll put it at B. I think it's best when it's paired with another unit like Gunpot or Recaller or Blink, whatever. Recaller gotta be like S tier. There's just a lot of merit to this. If you're in the counter tech game where both sides are just expanding, especially, Recaller can be especially good, because the larger amount of recalls you have in your army, the stronger you are getting compared to your opponent, because they, in mass, they're just so good at defending anywhere and everywhere, especially if you're all just massing expansions. And now melee units like Scorpion and Wasp start to lose their effectiveness when they can't necessarily surround everything properly because there's just too much of a clump, right? So Recall is like S. The Crab is like C tier. We got something finally for C tier that I'm comfortable putting C tier. It's like okay. It's fast. decent health and all that. But it doesn't even win a fight against equal food scorpions in any situation, really. Like whether it's just 2 food scorpions versus 2 food crab just attacking each other, the scorpions win. Whether it's 50 food scorpions versus 50 food crabs, scorpions win. Maybe if it's paired alongside a wall and the surface area is not great for the scorpions, maybe the crabs come out on top type of thing. But like, it's just unreliable. Scorpions are just far superior here. That being said, the crabs I think are still alright compared to some other. They're like alright. They can do their job, at least. They're decently fast. They have decent health. And sometimes you want health to be less vulnerable to AoE, depending what sort of AoE you're facing, I guess. Okay, Crusader. I used to actually play this unit a lot, and then I started playing it less. I think I'll put it at A tier. Definitely not S. I don't think I want to put it down at B. But yeah, it's like A tier. I think particularly if you're a recall player or a gunbot player, it can be pretty good to pair those ranged units with just a tanky frontliner. But you always run into the trouble of what if your opponent's playing destroyers and just starts essentially one-shotting these. They will technically survive a one shot from a destroyer, but they're like so low health that a little damage elsewhere or second destroyer shot is going to kill it pretty easily. But that being said, they still can do some good things. They're very tanky, and they can deal with certain splash like Shocker or Mortar, for instance. But they are clunky. They will kind of block each other, and being a melee unit, sometimes you're not able to get them in properly. But I think they're good when paired with range units, like I said. Recall and Gunbot. That being said, let's go to Gunbot. Gunbot has got to be S tier as well. But Gunbot does take a lot more control and is very vulnerable to splash, particularly things like Shocker, that you can get right away on tier 2, or mortars even. But they are very powerful. They just require a lot of extra micro because you have to always be activating their overclock ability and then kiting. Yeah. Still S tier, I would say. That being said, even though Recall and Gunbot are S tier, I've been playing Scorpion because I think it's a lot easier to just mix in Scorpions. They're good at harassing as well on the mineral lines, or worker lines, whatever you want to call them. I don't know, maybe Scorpion's even S tier as well, I don't know. So now we got the little missile bots, which also have overclock, and they're an anti-air unit, and I think they're like B tier. They're definitely very powerful, but they are really slow, and sometimes as anti-air, you want something more like the Blink Hunters. Like I said, being able to blink on stuff is very powerful. Maybe these are even A tier, actually. I do think they're, like I said, pretty strong. Maybe they're A tier. I think if you're in the sort of army, particularly with mortars, where you're just kind of stationary a lot of the time, these are fine to just cover because they are pretty strong for what they do, but they are lacking, mobility. So I'll put them A tier. Obviously they can overclock for move speed too. Mammoth. This one's hard to judge. I'm going to actually put it... Actually, this one's so tough. I kind of want to put Crusader to B and Mammoth to A. But honestly, I think Mammoth in S is fine. The main benefit of Mammoth is the fact that it's on the Star... Actually, I can't even remember. Is it Starforge or Starport? I think it's Starforge. Yeah, Starforge. And being on Starforge, it forces your opponent into questioning, are you going to be going into Mammoth or are you going to be going into air? And if you start building tier 1 anti-air because you're expecting dragonflies, for instance, and they have mammoths, your tier 1 anti-air is kind of like not so good. So there is that benefit of mammoth. They do have range, they're fairly tanky. Maybe they're same tier as Crusader, maybe Crusader should be one more tier lower. I don't know. I'm not really sure if I want to put them at S, but I think they're pretty valuable for sure. You will see a lot of them. I'm gonna leave it at S for now. And then advanced recallers, also S. These things I have grown to like a lot more. They are a little vulnerable to splash, like Mortar and Shocker, for instance, I guess. But they are very valuable. The fact that they have recall and the fact that they can take out things like Mammoth and Crab and Crusader, you know, like some of the tanky units, is pretty nice. And then they can also take out expansions. So like that middle expansion on the current map, if it's ever exposed for too long and you come in with a bunch of recallers, you can snipe that thing real quick and then even just recall out afterwards. So I think they're pretty valuable. I'll put them at S tier as well. Airship. Airship is like a tier 2 anti-air. This thing is... it does its job alright. It's very niche. It's like a B tier. The problem that Airship has is, unlike Valkyrie, you know, it's not the pinnacle of anti-air, and you essentially don't need this in most cases. Like the main counter for Airship is going to be against Falcons, but beyond that, I think I worded that wrong. The main thing you're looking to counter with airships is Falcons, but you don't really want to run airships just for one single unit type of thing. And you can still generally reach Valkyrie anyways against Falcon, because Falcons are slow and you can kind of hit and run, maybe sack one base and then get the Valkyrie out and just wipe the Falcons. Yeah. If you're facing tier 3 cat bus, you can go tier 3 Valkyrie yourself generally, you know, that type of thing. So airships are like B. They're like okay, but currently they don't do enough, I would say. Because the things I counter, like, let's say Dragonfly's here. I put Dragonfly like an A. Things I counter, Dragonflies also attack air. Obviously airships will win anti-air fights if you have enough count, but you do have to have enough count, and then you're left over with units that don't do much first ground. So yeah, I don't know how much more to say on that, but they're like B tier. Dragonfly, A tier, very fast, mobile, decent health, decent damage, attacks ground and air. If the anti-air that you're facing is ever in low numbers and you have high number Dragonflies, you can definitely take them out. I think they're pretty solid. They're not like broken S tier, because they will die to tier 1 anti-air if the tier 1 anti-air is like controlled properly and in high enough counts. But they are very annoying. They're kind of like the wasps of air, to be honest. If you're on like 3 base and they're like flying over the little mountain ridge type thing that you can't pass properly on the ground, they can be incredibly annoying, and they just get in your worker lines. They pick off stray units, and it's pretty solid. Let's add Blink. Blink is like probably A, I guess. It's pretty good. That's about all there is to say. It's pretty good, but its damage is quite low, and you really don't want to get caught out far from your base because you don't have things like recall to recall all the way back to your base. You don't have the overclock buff that stays on for quite a while for the move speed. You got one blink to get back, and so if you're ever caught out too far, they can kind of be lacking. But there is a lot of viability with blink, being able to just constantly do poke damage, blinking forward to do a little more damage, or blinking on certain units that don't want to be caught out. Like maybe destroyers, you can blink on those and take them out real quick. That can be pretty powerful. Blink's definitely pretty good, so I'll put it at like an 8. Now we get to some of the more interesting, less common, weird units. Stinger is like a C. It's fairly decent damage. It's fast, but it doesn't do good enough. I feel like if you're gonna run Stinger on Starforge, you should just be running Advanced Recall instead. Advanced Recall is much slower, but the fact that you can recall to different bases makes it a lot more valuable. Not to mention Advanced Recall is cheaper, so you can just kind of have mass and not be so vulnerable to, if your Stingers just get caught out, die, blinked on or something and focused down, they're just gone. But Recallers, it's a lot less vulnerable like that because you can have so many more of them since they're cheaper cost, if that makes sense. Now let's look at some of these other units. What are these all even called? Okay, so we got Butterfly. This one's like B tier. It's really good damage, but it is very vulnerable. If you get jumped on by some Blink Hunters, you will die pretty quickly. If you blink on Dragonflies, you might not even kill one, you might just damage one, right? But if you blink on Butterflies, you might even just kill 2 right off the bat because they're pretty low health. That being said, they do have value for sure. I have seen players use them to good extent, and they can snipe bases, they can snipe workers. If you have something else that's able to take out tier 1 anti-air, they can start overwhelming pretty quick too. So they're pretty good, but like B tier, I would say. Heavy Hunter is like C tier from my experience. The problem with Heavy Hunter is it takes a slot that you don't want to give up for it, and its only real benefit currently, in my opinion, is dealing with Falcons. I mean, it's alright at how to put it? You'll definitely be happy to have it against, Dragonflies and Butterflies as well. So you can go Foundry against those. But I would say its main purpose is just Falcon, take out Falcons, so you don't have to go tier 1 anti-air against Falcons. But even then, they just don't do enough besides that. And they take up a slot that could be Destroyers, Mortars, Shockers, Crabs, Crusaders. All these units that are, like, in my opinion, pretty highly rated. So it's like C tier. It has its niche. There is some value to it, but it doesn't stand out to me. It's more of just, if you have everything else that you want covered, apart from what Heavy Hunter can cover, it can definitely fit its role pretty good in that sense. But yeah, for me, not really as much value as that. Okay, so Artillery, this one. Artillery, I don't really know how to rate this one. I'm gonna put it C tier as well. Artillery is like pretty similar to Mortar, I believe. But the problem is it's tier 3 in Starforge. I think being at Starforge is actually its benefit because you're able to use it in Starforge. You know, you can have this AoE ground unit that doesn't require you to go Foundry, but you don't really want to tech up to this. You could just go Mortar on tier 2 instead. So it's currently just in a weird spot where it doesn't serve much purpose. I'll put it at C, even though it can be as strong as like Mortars basically, or similar to them at least. Now let's go to the Locust. So I haven't seen these a ton, but I'm also gonna put them C tier. I think they're very cheap, decently fast, quick attack speed, whatever. They have they're just like all around okay-ish. But I think they're like vulnerable enough to tier 1 anti-air that they're not really worth going tier 3 to get this. So it's like C tier. I do think they can overrun tier 1 anti-air as well, but you know, it's kind of risky, similar like Butter. Like you don't really want to rely on these overrunning tier 1 anti-air, because if you don't necessarily do it right away, you're just gonna get overrun back, and it's pretty bad. And then we got Advanced Bot. I have not seen this that much at all, if at all, really. I think it's kind of bad. I don't know if is Advanced Bot like D? I think Advanced Bot's just like D. I think it's kind of bad. I don't know. Maybe it's like C. There is the merit that it's not taking blue resource as a tier 3 unit, which is cool. But it just doesn't seem worth going into. You don't really want to go tier 3 just to make these, probably. Now, some of these other ones I think are a little more viable, like the Assault Bot here. So the Assault Bot is pretty cool because it doesn't take blue resource. I'm not sure if I'd rate it super high, but I'll put it like B tier. It's like middle of the line. It's definitely valuable, but it can be difficult going tier 3 just to make these. And they don't have, you know, they're not as good as being able to blink around, I would say. But they're okay in straight up fights. So I'll put them B tier. Predator is like C. You can have like counter a few things that you want to counter when it comes to like air. But I think it's way too it's kind of like Heavy Hunter, right? It's an anti-air in the Foundry. It has really good range, and I believe like splash damage as well against air. But the niche it fills is just not currently good enough. So it's like C tier. I wouldn't say it's like complete trash, mostly just because it has high range, which gives it some viability to like stay back and snipe stuff out. But it's not great. It maybe should be D tier. Then we got Zabombas. These are like Banelings from StarCraft. And honestly, I've never really used them, but I think they're actually good. I'm gonna put them B tier in like the middle. They just... I'm not a fan of that sort of playstyle where you are essentially just exploding your units. I like to have units that have more substance than that. So it's hard for me to judge this one, but they definitely can do big damage. But if you're looking for AoE damage, you could just run something like a Shocker instead, right? Rather than the the cheaper bomber that doesn't leave you with a unit afterwards. So it's like B tier. There's definitely value, but it's not the greatest. Okay, and then we got the Raider. This thing, I'm gonna put it C tier. It's really good at what it does, which is taking out workers. But when you have to sacrifice a unit slot just to fit this in, means that your other options for combat are more limited, right? Like if you're running Raider and your other unit is, you know, Crusader or something, right? You're very limited in what you can do in combat, because basically your combat is always going to be Crusader plus your tier 1 if you go Foundry. The Raider's just doing run-bys all the time, that's it. You don't have any options. But if you run Crusader Shocker, now you can either get mass AoE with Shockers, you can have a composition of both, where you got a little bit of frontline, a little bit of AoE. You can do mass Crusaders and push forward if you're pushing through splash mortars right away or something. There's a lot of viability for the fights. But Raiders are just like I said, they just do run-bys, which is great if they work and not so great if they don't, and your straight up fights are just worse because you only have one unit to rely on. Because I'd say like the C. They definitely do their job well, but their job is not good enough currently to merit using. And then we got Recall Shockers. This little dinosaur dude. I'm not even sure where to put this. I would put them below normal Shockers. I'm not sure if I should put them this low at like C or if I should put them at like B. They're just really slow. And in general, I would say not as good as Shocker to begin with. The only benefit of these really is the fact that they have recall, which is very valuable, but not valuable enough to where I would say to use them over other things. So I would put it as like a C. Okay, we got 2 units left. The Swift Shocker. Also, I should mention this is heavy ballista, not ballista. This one is ballista. Technically, yeah. I always just call this one ballista because it's the only one you actually see. But this one's the actual ballista at tier 2. This one's the heavy ballista at tier 3. Yeah, the normal ballista, I think it's like a B. Like it's okay, but I'm pretty sure if you're going to look for some sort of like tier 2 splash, you just play Shocker instead. So it's mostly that it's just currently overshown by Shocker. And in that case, it's like a B. It's alright, but because it's just Shocker's generally superior as far as my understanding goes, it just doesn't, it's just not as good. Swift Shocker. I'm also going to put this at a B. I kind of want to put this at C as well, but there is some merit to this one. This one is very fast, which being fast and mobile can be really good. You can get into position properly in fights quicker. I think it's actually fairly quick attacking as well. I'm not sure on that, on the attack speed, but yeah. Like straight up fights, you'd rather have Shocker than the Swift Shocker, but Swift Shocker can definitely catch your opponent off guard with its speed. I think it's okay. It's like a B. I think that's going to be it for my tier 1, or my tier 1, my 1v1 tier list for Battle Aces. The video took quite a while to actually finish because I was kind of explaining some of the units as well, but yeah, this is what it looks like. Definitely some of the units could go up or down a tier based on other people's own preferences, or like what playstyle they like, or what units they're trying to combine them with. But this is my generalization of them. Some are obviously just bad. But yeah, there are things like Heavy Hunter, for instance, that I have down at C, that if your niche really just needs a tier 2 anti-air, to deal with things like falcons. Obviously, this gets a lot more value. Maybe it's more like an A tier type unit to you. So, yeah, there's that. Yeah, this is what I currently think, or close enough to what I think. I don't know. Maybe maybe any given day or any given hour, this might slightly change for me. But yeah, this is my general list here. But hopefully, you're able to get something from this list, and you know, make your own list if you want to share your own thoughts. Yeah, have fun out there playing some battle aces. I know the beta's just about to end, but I'm sure there'll be, actually I don't even know what their schedule is. Will it be another beta, or will it be like the actual game coming out next? I don't look forward to it. Definitely fun, fast paced, and yeah. I may do a 2v2 tier list as well, but I don't have as much experience in 2v2 to judge it properly, so not sure. That will be it.